having a life scholarship and being able to afford to go to college made me feel inspired to go.
When I got a life scholarship, it was such a relief.
I knew that I wanted to have an impact. Having a life scholarship through the SC Education Lottery was huge. It gave me the opportunity to make that impact right here at home.
The South Carolina Education Lottery. A better you, a better us, a better South Carolina. Visit sceducationlottery.com/betteryou.
What is going on, men? Welcome to another episode of Gunfighter Life, where we talk about guns and adjacent topics the right way, with Almighty God at the center, and real-world military law enforcement, private contracting, competition shooting experience. Today we're going to be talking about races won and lost in the firearms world. Hopefully that intrigues you a little bit on today's episode. I woke up at 4 something. Well, let me back up. I worked a full day yesterday, went to a shooting competition right after work, went for a ruck after that to try and come down with some of the adrenaline, testosterone, and all that. Went for a ruck and then hopefully go to bed. But it took me a long time to get to bed after both of those things. And I woke up at 4 something in the morning to do a long drive to where I do private contracting work to commute in, only to get there and realize that I wasn't supposed to be there. They had changed my schedule, and it was my fault. They gave me plenty of notice. It wasn't even a schedule change. I had just been working that shift for a while, and I assumed I was on it this week, and I was not. That was my fault. So I could have slept in, and I hate getting up early. I kind of detest it. Unless I'm going to hunt, unless I'm going to put food on the table, I'm really not a fan of getting up. It should probably be against the law to make a man get up before 10 a.m. But I got up super early, drove in, only to find out that I wasn't supposed to be there. So you're going to get some more content. I've been working a lot, as you might imagine. I've had some up tempo lately. Operational tempo has gone up at work. You guys, no surprise there, but today was a day off for me, and I went into work anyway. And it's a long drive, and it's not like I'm driving that far and then driving back and probably going back to sleep, especially since I got up at 4 something so I could hit the gym before work. So the bright side is that I'll get some more content in for you guys. The maybe not so good side is it's going to be mobile, right? I didn't bring my professional studio, which is a microphone and a laptop with me to work. So you're getting it all on the mobile phone. So maybe the audio will be a little bit subpar, but hopefully you appreciate the content, because I've been trying to balance both things and still get the podcast out and still do the other job. And also, I'll read my Bible every day, work out, be a good husband, hopefully be a, good owner and master of the dogs. So anyway, just a little bit of update there. Races won and lost in the firearms world. The big one that comes to mind, the 870 and the Mossberg 500. And when I say those, I mean the whole family, right? You can throw in the 590. You could throw in, some other models in there. But really that one. And for a while it was a three-way kind of jockeying. It was the Winchester 1200, 1300. Those were real popular for a while. They lost the race a long time ago. I assume because of price. The older school Winchesters were they were exquisitely made. Like the jeweled bolt and everything. Those old pump-action Winchesters were just great. But I remember growing up, you could get all the tactical mods, maybe not all, but a lot of them for the Winchester 1300s, the folding stocks, the special tactical stuff, and that kind of fell off. Now those Winchester pump shotguns are made in Turkey; they're not even American. They were out of the race. Although I don't think there's anything wrong with those shotguns, inherently wrong with them. And in fact, they're one of the few pump shotguns where you can feed short shells. So if you're looking to do that, one of the Winchester 12-1300s you can feed short shells in, which didn't even exist when they came out. It's just that just the way they work with the lifter and the mechanism. But anyway, then for a long time it was the 870 and the Mossberg 500, and they're both good designs. Inherently, they're both fine. They both have their strengths and weaknesses. I'll be honest, I think I shoot a Remington 870 a little bit better, but I think the Mossberg is a better design with a few caveats. The Mossberg has 2 extractors. I like that. Redundancy is good. So if one gives you an issue, you still have at least one more to grab the back of that shell and extract it. I really like that. I like the fact that you can change out the ejector with a screwdriver instead of needing to weld it in or braze it in or whatever they do. If you get a problem with your 871, you can't really replace it on your end. But you can do that with a 500. I think both those things are great. I also like the open manner of the bottom of the receiver for reloads. I think reloading a 500, 590 series is way better than doing it with an 870. That said, I shoot the 870 better. I have a lot more professional experience with the 870, and the 870 is a fine shotgun. The 870 has a steel receiver usually, maybe always, but the ones I'm familiar with have a steel receiver. The 500 has an aluminum receiver. I just think it slaps the side of my face a little bit harder with the aluminum. So I like the 870. It points well. It shoots well. The old 870s are fantastic. I'm going to say, I'm not exactly sure the exact year, but I'm going to say late 90s, maybe into the early aughts. They were okay. They were very even the Expresses, which were like the bargain basement Walmart versions, they were good. The new ones, I can't endorse them. I mean, their quality control went down when Remington came back out of like bankruptcy and started introducing stuff. They came back out with an 870, and I thought, I'm going to buy one of those just because I want to support Remington. I like the 870. I'm going to buy a new model, and I bought it, and that thing was garbage. I mean, garbage. It wouldn't run factory ammo brand new out of the box. Like, what are we doing here? Like, no thanks. So I did a bunch of work to get it running well, and then I got rid of it. I wasn't going to sell a gun that was having problems, so I fixed all the stuff. But after that, I just didn't love it anymore. You shouldn't have to buy a brand new Remington that's not a cheap budget gun anyway, that runs worse than a cheap budget gun nowadays. So they lost the race. They lost the race due to, in my opinion, quality control issues, their bankruptcy, and all the other litigious things that happened with Remington. That is a sad state of affairs with our litigious society that we live in, and a sad state of affairs with just quality control. And like, how do you not make one of your flagship products that you made for decades and not make it well? So yeah, the Remington 870 kind of lost the race. Unless Remington really gets their stuff together and really starts making a decent shotgun again, I think that race was won by the Mossberg 500. And I think, again, both designs are very, very good. I don't think design-wise, inherently, one is better than the other. They're both very good. But I do think that Mossberg has really won that race. If somebody asked me today, I'm looking for a pump shotgun, I'm going to say get a Mossberg 500 or get the cheaper version, which is the Maverick 88, which is still, I believe, made in America. That's like my recommendation. I would not recommend you getting an 870. I just couldn't recommend it unless you find an older one. But if you say, I'm going to go buy a brand new pump shotgun with the Winchester, I mean, they're made in Turkey, so why would you buy a Turkish gun when you could buy an American gun? Unless you just don't mind arming your enemies or arming people that want to kill you or hate you or whatever, sending them money. If you want to, that's fine. But I mean, that's maybe it's not fine, but it's your money. I don't get to tell you what to do with your money. So you got the Remingtons, which may or may not work right out of the box, and they're not cheap. Or you could get and in fact, if you said, do you recommend a brand new 870, what are the new model, the Fieldmaster, or a Maverick 88, which is their budget version of the Mossberg, which is way cheaper, I would recommend the Maverick 88. I'm not familiar with any of those having any problems. So they won that race due to just good quality control. I don't know if it was something inherent with the design. I'm not an engineer where, like, you can make this is speculation. This is not fact. I've not studied, like, exploded diagrams and things like this in engineering. But Perhaps the Mossberg can be made cheaper and still run well as part of the design, but if you want to make an 870 run well, it really has to be made well. Like the old 870 Wingmasters, like I have behind me in the truck, those things just run and run and run like they're on fire. They're fantastic. But you start slipping with that quality control, and man, they suck real fast. So I think they lost that race, and the Mossberg 500 family won that race. And again, 500, 590, 88, whatever, yeah, that whole family, they won that race. The Mossberg and the Remington, Mossberg won that. And unless Remington really gets its act together, and it's going to take a lot, then it would take a lot for me to recommend a new Remington over a really old Remington. I would take a rusted out old Wingmaster over a brand spanking new 870. So where was I going with that? They lost that race. Let's talk about another one. How about the 40 Smith & Wesson and the 9mm? For a while, everybody was pushing like a drug cartel, pushing the 40, all these bureaucracies, these federal agencies, police departments. When I was L.A.P.D, when I worked some other law enforcement roles, 40. You gotta have 49mm, a WIMP cartridge, and I got on the 9mm train way before it was popular again. Like way back in the day, when I was the only one I knew of in my circle of law enforcement running 9. Because I looked at the real world data and actually shot it against the clock, not some super, liberal time limit on a police qual, but actually as fast as I could shoot. And I thought 40 doesn't make any sense. And I think that's largely what the conclusion the FBI and many others went to, is that what are we doing here? The 40 makes no sense ever, anywhere, period. Why? What are we doing? It's one of those things that looks good on paper, but when you actually pick it up, it's just nasty. It's just atrocious. Like the girl that looks good at a distance, and you walk up and she doesn't have any teeth. You're like, oh, maybe not. That's the 40 Smith & Wesson. It's just garbage. Now it still works. I still have to use them sometimes for work. Why? Because in private security contracting, much like in military circles, a lot of stuff goes for the cheapest bidder, and nobody wants the 40. And then you get a bureaucracy, a big company or whatever.
This is your before and after story. Prepare for an incredible career in nursing. At Southeastern College, experience expert hands-on training. Learn real-world skills in our professional lab and simulated settings. And train for opportunities as a practical nurse, registered nurse, or career advancement with our RN to BSN program. At Southeastern College, your future is bright. Visit sac.edu to get started.
And they're like, how can we save money? Well, nobody wants these 40s. We can buy them for a song and a dance. Let's just, sure, they're an abomination to shoot. Sure, it's a horrid, wretched thing to hold in your hand and shoot, and they're outdated and they have finger grooves, but they're cheap and they will theoretically poke a hole in something. So let's buy those because they're cheap. I get it. And they do poke a hole. To be fair, they will kill somebody. If that's your criteria, if your criteria is being the most mediocre thing and doing stuff that doesn't make sense, the 40 is for you. But the 40 Smith & Wesson lost that race a long time ago. There is no real world data. Now, I'll tell you, just based on numbers and physics, shot for shot, if you put it in exactly the same place, the 40 will do more damage than the 9mm. But I have never, ever, in my circles, I've also been a professional firearms instructor, see the bio. I have taught at what was the largest, civilian firearms training academy in the country. I've been an N.R.A. instructor a long time, been a law enforcement F.B.I. handgun instructor for a long time. I have never, ever seen anybody shoot a 40 as well as they shoot a 9mm. Ever. It's just not a thing. So theoretically, if you put a bullet in exactly the same place, then it would do a little bit more damage. But I've never seen any real world data where it makes any difference. So what are you doing? So it lost that race, and it lost it for a good reason, because it's dumb. On the 40. Can you tell I don't like 40? Now again, it's your money. If you want to buy a 40, buy it and then buy a 9mm conversion barrel. but no, seriously, if you want to buy a 40 to shoot a 40, go ahead. It will still kill things. It will just do it a lot slower and at more expense and more recoil than is necessary and more cost than is necessary. But if you want to do it, have fun. But it lost that race, right? It lost that race. 9mm is like the only caliber I can think of in the world that's used by everybody. It's used by us. It's used by the Germans. We adopted a German cartridge. That's how good it is. The Russians, which try to stay away from anything NATO and like American and whatever, I think, for like small arms, they use 9mm. I think China uses 9mm. I can't think of a major world power or even a minor world power, except for maybe Brazil, that doesn't use the 9mm. Because it's good. That's why. So, yeah, the 40 lost that race. Ooh, this is going to get even more heated. The AR versus the AK in America on the American market. Not in the sandbox slinging hot rocks at each other. Not in, sub-Saharan Africa where they're genociding Christians or whatever's going on. So, not there. But here on the American market, the AK lost that race. There was a time where the AK in America made a lot of sense. You could get a decent one, surplus, for good money. You could get the ammo surplus. Maybe it was corrosive. Maybe it wasn't the best. Maybe it was steel case. But it was a decent enough ammo for a cheap price. There was a time when those were kind of like a debatable thing. But nowadays, I think if you get one, you just get it because you love the AK. It lost that race on the American market. The AKs, I think, because they were so cheap on the American market for so long, people got the idea that they were a cheap gun to make. They were not a cheap gun to make. You were getting them cheap because you were the beneficiary of winning the Cold War, and a bunch of countries that needed cash were surplusing their arsenals or using a bunch of the parts and just maybe converting them to semi-auto so they could just use all the machinery and tooling they had and maybe change one part, and you were getting a really good rifle, world-renowned reliability at bargain basement prices. And I think because of that, people thought they were a cheap gun. They're not a cheap gun to make. They're not an easy gun to manufacture. They're actually quite hard to manufacture, and they're hard to put together, a lot harder when you compare them to an AR-15. They lost that race because when that market dried up, now for a decent new AK, you're talking $1,000. And the opposite has happened on the American market with ARs. A decent AR you can have for, $500, $500-600. There's a lot of really good decent ARs. So you're talking about half the money. Same thing with the ammo. 7.62x39 is not expensive, but it's not anywhere near as affordable in America as 223 5.56. It's just not. Now, I actually do think that the 7.62x39 is a better intermediate cartridge round per round than 5.56, but not enough to pay that much more for it. And the prices you're getting for halfway decent 7.62x39, you start looking at $308 in the American market for that. So those things, coupled with the fact that, and this is no fault of the AK just came out in an era when iron sights on fighting rifles weren't a thing. So did the AR-15. They're both Cold War classics, right? One came out in the 40s, one came out in the 50s. They're old guns. The AR is an old gun. The AK is an even older gun. But just by the nature of the design, which I don't think was any intent, it just happened to be that way, the AR has lent itself much better to optics. You can get a flat top upper, which is kind of the standard now, and that's a really, really good rock-solid, steady mounting platform for good modern optics. You can mount optics on an AK, but not well. Everything is kind of a kludgy workaround. You got to mount it on the gas tube rail up front, which gets crazy hot, which is not a good idea and not super stable. You got to have some giant, weird, offset side mount thing that adds a bunch of extra stuff. And one of the good things that makes optics good is they can be simple and rugged nowadays, and just that mount alone is just crazy. So there's really, and you can get some that mount on the dust cover, but the dust cover is not a super robust part of the gun, right? The AK will fire just fine without the dust cover. It's a piece of sheet metal. So that's not the best. A little piece of sheet metal with a rail on top is not the best place to mount an optic. So there's really no good way to mount an optic on an AK. And that's another big reason it lost the race. And it's a fine gun, but use it for what it is. Get one for nostalgia, get one because you love the AK, get one because you want to rock an AK with iron sights. That's fine. But it lost the race on the American market. It just did. And for all the factors that I think, in my opinion, all the factors that I just mentioned. Again, a decade ago, you could make a real good argument either way. Today, you can't. Today, you get one because you want the AK or you're heavily invested in it, or because you love Red Dawn, or whatever. But looking at it logically, there's really not a good reason. And if you love 7.62x39, I would tell you it's also a piston gun, and it's about the same price nowadays for a good one, and it's much better optics mounting. Get a Mini 30. Get a Ruger Mini 30. It's a great gun. And I think it makes more sense given the price of a decent AK on the American market today, especially if you're going to mount an optic on it. Again, if you just want an AK because you want an AK, you're not arguing from logic and reason. You're just like, I want an AK. Then get an AK. But it lost the race to the AR-15 for, I think, those reasons. Next, what has become the dominant... I should briefly mention I think we take for granted the 1913 rail, right? When I went to war in Iraq, that wasn't a thing. When I was there for the initial invasion of Iraq, we had old M16A2s with iron sights. And if you wanted to mount something on the forend, it was that classic, like, clamshell forend. You had to have some kind of crazy special mount to mount anything on there. A flashlight, PEC2s, lasers. I think we take for granted the standardization of the 1913 rail. That won the race. There probably would have been other ones that did okay, right? For a while, there was the HK rail. There's nothing really wrong with the HK rail. It just didn't become the standard. The 1913 rail won that race, and I'm so glad that it did. And for a while, on fighting rifles, that was kind of the quad rail was the standard. And that was way better than anything we had at the time, right? When I went back again for my second tour, in the sandbox, we had a quad. We had an M16A4s with a quad rail and an ACOG, just leaps and bounds ahead in technology in just a few years. But that was the standard for a while. That lost out, and so did Key-Mod, and so did the Samson rail and some other systems to M-Lock. I'm old enough to have been in the game long enough when all that stuff was relevant. Now it's pretty much M-Lock. And M-Lock allowing you to mount 1913 rail. You get the M-Lock and you mount the rail where you want it. I don't know that it's any better than Key-Mod or the Samson system or any of the other systems. It just became the standard. I think a big reason for that is Magpul is a good, decent American-made company. I'm not sponsored by them or anything, but they had a lot of purchasing power. They had a lot of product support behind them. They made a lot of stuff for ARs anyway. So I think that just won out. It was a good system. I don't know if there was any... Honestly, I don't know if it was better than any of the other systems. It just won the race because of marketing or market support or companies willing to adopt it because they assumed Magpul would be around to support it. Whatever the reason is, it has become the standard. It has won that race. The M-Lock system, it's a good system. So instead of having that giant quad rail with a bunch of, the tactical cheese grater with a bunch of extra rail that you probably are never going to use and probably shouldn't use, vertical forends, no thanks. But where was I going with that? The M-Lock has won that race. So that, and I think it's, again, just as good as the other ones. Would any of the other ones have been okay too? Yeah, they would have been fine. And even the old quad rail, if you have one, unless you're really trying to cut weight, then just take a Dremel to the parts you don't want. But the quad rail was fine. The M-Lock is better. The other systems were fine too, but the M-Lock won that race. And it's a good system. And if you look at how far we've come since... the M16A2 in just a short amount of time as far as the ability to put force multipliers on your rifle and your pistol, right? You use the same rail on your pistol. That 1913 rail and the M-Lock system, that's kind of won that race. And I'm glad that it did. I'm glad we have a standard. I'm glad there's not like five different things you have to worry about, like when you get an optic. I'm glad there's a standard rail system. I'm glad there's an M-Lock system for forends and stuff like that. So, anyway, with that, guys, I thought this would be a fun episode. Hopefully, you'll forgive the mobile nature of, recording this on the cell phone. But I'm glad you guys are getting some content. I'm I'm glad I had a little bit of extra time today to get some content in. So I appreciate you guys. I appreciate all that you do. Thank you for listening. If you're a patron, thank you for being one. If you want to consider that, there's a lot of insider-only content on Patreon. So with that, we'll close out with the tactical verse of the day, Exodus 15. The Lord is a man of war. Thanks for listening, and have a blessed day.
Having a life scholarship and being able to afford to go to college made me feel inspired to go.
When I got a life scholarship, it was such a relief.
I knew that I wanted to have an impact. Having a life scholarship through the S.C. Education Lottery was huge. It gave me the opportunity to make that impact right here at home.
The South Carolina Education Lottery. A better you, a better us, a better South Carolina. Visit sceducationlottery.com/betteryou.